The pressure on Princess Leonor of Spain to find a partner. Choosing a king. Dawn settles over Zaragoza as a military courtyard comes into focus. Boots aligned. Flags held still against the air. Stone buildings that have seen centuries of oath-taking stand unmoved as a young woman crosses the ground with measured steps. No entourage. No flourish. Just presence. The kind that carries weight without sound. Princess Leonor of Spain does not walk alone here. She walks with the accumulated expectations of a state that remembers what happens when continuity fractures. This is not a story about romance. It never was. In constitutional monarchies, partnership is not private. It is functional. It is succession made visible. It is the moment when personal life becomes state architecture. National identity is woven into these rituals, and nowhere more tightly than in the choice of a consort. The pressure is not spoken. It does not need to be. It exists in protocols written long before she was born, in calendars that quietly extend into decades, in the knowledge that a monarchy survives not by sentiment but by sequence. Princess Leonor of Spain is Spain's future head of state. That role demands continuity that feels natural, not engineered. Yet continuity does not emerge on its own. It is constructed, carefully, relentlessly. The public imagines choice as freedom. The institution understands choice as risk. At 2 minutes, the first reframing arrives. The question is not whether Princess Leonor of Spain will find love. The question is whether love, once found, can survive conversion into duty. Because to love Leonor is to enlist in the state, her husband will not be a prince, but a permanent public servant. That transformation is irreversible. History has trained the Spanish crown to think this way. The modern monarchy did not inherit unbroken reverence. It was restored, conditionally, as a stabilizing mechanism after rupture. Its legitimacy has always depended on restraint, discipline, and the careful avoidance of personalization. A consort introduces personality into an institution designed to suppress it. That tension is structural. Every potential partner is measured against criteria never published and never denied. Political neutrality, cultural adaptability, psychological resilience, capacity for erasure. Because the role requires not visibility, but endurance. This is the living thread of continuity. In private, the institution does not ask who would make Princess Leonor of Spain happiest. It asks who would make the crown least vulnerable. At 5 minutes, the words return, heavier now. Choosing a king. Not because Spain needs a ruler beside its future queen, but because symbolism demands balance. The consort must appear strong without rivaling authority, present without attracting gravity, loyal without ambition. That combination is rare. In the United Kingdom, this calculus is well understood. British experience has demonstrated how consorts shape public perception without holding power, and how misalignment can generate decades of adjustment. Observers there would read Spain's process not as delay, but as institutional caution. The United States views it differently. There, monarchy is not tradition but anomaly. Analysts focus on stability signals. A future queen under visible pressure to marry suggests vulnerability. A future queen moving at her own institutional pace suggests confidence. Washington reads these cues quietly, and adjusts its expectations accordingly. At 8 minutes, the deeper mystery emerges. Spain has never clarified what role it expects a male consort to inhabit in a society deeply sensitive to power imbalance and modern equality. That ambiguity is deliberate. It allows the institution to adapt when the moment comes. But it also means the rules will be written in real time. In real-time governance is dangerous. Canada and Australia, watching from constitutional distance, interpret this ambiguity as a stress test. If Spain can modernize the consort role without destabilizing authority, it strengthens the argument that monarchy remains adaptable. If not, it reinforces doubts already circulating in Republican discourse. Germany, ever attentive to institutional clarity, notices the absence of defined limits. History there has taught suspicion of roles without guardrails. At 10 minutes, the strain begins to show. Because time applies pressure even when no decision is made. Silence invites speculation. Speculation creates narratives. Narratives harden into expectation. And expectation becomes constraint. The longer Princess Leonor of Spain remains unattached, the more the public projects. Each projection adds weight to the eventual choice. This is the paradox of restraint. What protects the institution in the short term increases the stakes in the long term. Continuity is not abstract here, it is embodied in visible presence. And absence, too, becomes visible. At 14 minutes, the point of no return comes into view. The moment a partner is publicly acknowledged, the institution loses deniability. From that point forward, the consort is no longer an individual. He is a function, a permanent extension of the state, bound to neutrality, permanence, and restraint. There is no retreat from that conversion. The Spanish crown understands that a poorly integrated consort does not merely create controversy. He becomes a focal point for every unresolved anxiety about relevance, cost, and identity. The institution would rather absorb criticism for caution than risk exposure through haste. At 19 minutes, the future threat appears. Not scandal, not rebellion, something quieter. Role confusion. If the consort's function is misunderstood, debated, or contested, the monarchy expends capital explaining itself instead of embodying continuity. Explanation is erosion. The moment an institution must justify its existence aloud, it has already ceded ground. International partners notice this shift instantly. The United States recalibrates ceremonial engagement. The United Kingdom recognizes familiar warning signs. Canada and Australia reframe their internal debates. Germany notes the loss of structural clarity. None of this is announced. It is felt. And so the pressure on Princess Leonor of Spain remains, constant but controlled. Not to choose quickly, not to choose publicly, but to choose correctly, according to criteria older than public memory and stricter than modern expectation. Choosing a king. In the final moments, the phrase no longer sounds romantic. It sounds administrative, constitutional, heavy with consequence. The future queen knows that whoever stands beside her will surrender anonymity forever, desire often, and selfhood partially. In return, he will receive no crown, no authority, and no escape. Only service. The institution waits because waiting preserves alignment. And alignment preserves survival. When the decision finally emerges, it will not feel sudden. It will feel inevitable, as if the structure always knew where it was going. Until then, Spain stands at the edge of continuity, watching carefully, aware that what comes next will not be undone. And history, patient as ever, remains undecided. What remains is the human cost the institution never acknowledges publicly. Because while systems endure, individuals absorb the strain. Princess Leonor of Spain lives inside a paradox few outside power truly understand. She must appear ordinary enough to embody a modern nation, yet exceptional enough to justify inherited authority. Friendship is scrutinized. Familiarity is contextualized. Proximity is interpreted. Nothing is neutral. Every potential relationship is evaluated not only for who the other person is, but for who they might become under pressure. The institution does not fear malice. It fears fragility. It fears a consort who bends under visibility, who resents restraint, who mistakes proximity to power for possession of it. This is why the crown treats intimacy as a security matter. Not out of cruelty. Out of memory. Spain has seen what happens when personal dynamics destabilize public confidence. It has seen how quickly legitimacy evaporates when private conduct appears misaligned with public duty. Those lessons were expensive. They are not forgotten. This is the quiet discipline surrounding her. Freedom exists, but it is bounded. Choice exists, but it is weighted. Love is permitted, but only if it can survive translation into service. Because to love Leonor is to enlist in the state, her husband will not be a prince, but a permanent public servant. That sentence is not metaphor. It is operational reality. The consort will have no independent platform, no autonomous agenda, no separate identity in the public record. He will be defined by proximity and constrained by protocol. His success will be measured by absence of disruption, not presence of charisma. This is not a role designed to attract ambition. And that, too, narrows the field. At this level, compatibility is not emotional resonance. It is tolerance for erasure. Capacity for discipline. Acceptance that one's life will be shaped by schedules written by others and silences that must be respected without explanation. Very few are suited to that existence. The institution knows this. It plans accordingly. This is why there is no rush. Pressure exists, but it is calibrated. The crown would rather withstand years of speculation than decades of structural imbalance. Time, here, is a filter. Those who cannot endure invisibility remove themselves without confrontation. Those who remain are observed, not encouraged. Patience becomes proof. International observers understand this dynamic even if they do not articulate it. In the United Kingdom, it is recognized as the quiet crucible of consortship. In the United States, it is interpreted as an unusual but rational constraint on personal freedom in service of institutional continuity. In Canada and Australia, it reinforces the perception that monarchy demands sacrifices incompatible with contemporary expectations. In Germany, it confirms a long-held skepticism toward roles defined by function without agency. Each interpretation feeds back into Spain's own calculus. Because global credibility is cumulative, monarchies do not exist in isolation. They exist in comparison. And comparison is unforgiving. As Princess Leonor of Spain advances toward adulthood in full public view, the pressure will not crescendo dramatically. It will persist steadily. Like gravity. Always present. Always shaping movement. The institution does not demand a decision today. It demands readiness for when the decision becomes unavoidable. That is the difference. When the moment arrives, it will not be framed as fulfillment. It will be framed as continuity. As duty assumed. As service expanded. The language will be careful. The symbolism restrained. Because restraint is how the crown survives. Until then, the silence remains intentional. Protective. Heavy with implication. Spain waits not for a love story, but for alignment. And in that waiting, the future queen continues forward, carrying the weight of a choice that will define not just who walks beside her, but how the institution itself is seen, long after the doors close and the public returns to quiet. There is also the question the institution never asks aloud, but always calculates. What happens if no choice satisfies the system? Modern Spain is not aristocratic in composition. It is plural, mobile, skeptical of inherited privilege, and alert to imbalance. The traditional pool from which royal consorts once emerged no longer exists in the same form. Yet the expectations designed for that world remain embedded in protocol. This creates a narrowing corridor. A partner drawn from public life introduces conflicts of neutrality. A partner drawn from private life invites scrutiny and untested resilience. A partner drawn from international circles complicates national identification. Each option carries cost. The crown is not searching for perfection. It is searching for least resistance over decades. That is a different metric entirely. This is where pressure becomes structural rather than personal. Princess Leonor of Spain does not experience this as command. She experiences it as environment. As the constant presence of limits she did not design but must navigate. Her education has prepared her for command of self, not command of outcome. This is the living thread of continuity. At a certain point, the absence of a partner stops being neutral. It becomes a data point. Commentators do not need facts. They need patterns. And patterns invite interpretation. Interpretation hardens into expectation. Expectation becomes leverage. This is how external pressure enters an institution that prides itself on insulation. The Spanish crown understands that it cannot allow the narrative to drift into one of delay or avoidance. Delay suggests uncertainty. Uncertainty invites challenge. Challenge weakens authority that depends on calm inevitability. Yet speed would be worse. A hurried alignment signals fear. Fear is contagious. So the institution walks a narrow line, managing time without appearing managed by it. Allowing maturity to unfold without appearing stalled. Projecting readiness without revealing urgency. From the outside, this looks passive. From the inside, it is constant calibration. Internationally, the signals are read with care. In the United States, analysts note whether the monarchy appears reactive to public discourse or anchored in long-term planning. The former suggests vulnerability. The latter suggests durability. In the United Kingdom, familiarity sharpens judgment. British observers recognize when an institution is buying time and when it is losing it. They know the difference between patience and drift. Canada and Australia observe the generational response. Younger audiences there are already distant from monarchy. Spain's handling of succession and partnership will either reinforce that distance or complicate it. Germany, focused on institutional clarity, watches for rule-making by precedent. What Spain allows once becomes expectation later. That principle is well understood. All of this converges on a single reality. Princess Leonor of Spain is not under pressure to choose a partner because the state desires a wedding. She is under pressure because continuity without visible succession eventually feels theoretical. Continuity must be seen to be believed. And belief, once delayed too long, becomes conditional. The crown knows this. That knowledge sharpens the silence. It does not break it. Because the worst outcome is not controversy. It is the gradual sense that the institution is hesitating at the very moment it must appear most certain. So the future queen advances carefully, aware that every year adds weight, every appearance adds inference, every absence adds interpretation. Not trapped, but constrained, not coerced, but accountable. The choice ahead remains singular in its consequence. Whoever stands beside her will not complete her story. He will complicate it. He will absorb pressure meant for the institution. He will become a buffer between continuity and criticism. That is the role. And until someone is willing, and able, to assume it fully, the system holds. Because in monarchies, waiting is not indecision. It is defense. Eventually, the institution reaches the limit of waiting. Not because of impatience, but because continuity must be demonstrated before it can be assumed. A monarchy cannot live forever on potential. At some point, it must show its next configuration to the nation it claims to serve. This is where pressure crystallizes. Princess Leonor of Spain carries it not as demand, but as knowledge. Knowledge that the state does not ask for sacrifice loudly. It structures life so that sacrifice becomes the only stable option. She has been prepared for that reality from the beginning. Not to resist it, to master it. The partner she will one day choose will enter a role with no clear rewards and permanent exposure. He will be scrutinized for what he says, what he does not say, and eventually for what he never intended to represent. His usefulness will be measured by how little attention he draws to himself, and how effectively he absorbs attention meant for the crown. This is the quiet economy of monarchy. Power is preserved by displacement. Pressure is redistributed. Individuals carry what institutions cannot be seen to carry themselves. This is the living thread of continuity. When that partner finally appears, Spain will not celebrate the man. It will assess the structure. Does the image feel steady? Does it feel compatible? Does it feel inevitable? Those reactions will form in silence, long before they appear in polls or editorials. International observers will register the same signals. The United States will note whether the institution projects calm certainty or managed vulnerability. The United Kingdom will sense whether the balance has been struck or merely postponed. Canada and Australia will weigh whether monarchy still demonstrates adaptability without surrendering authority. Germany will ask whether the role has been defined clearly enough to prevent drift. None of these judgments will be announced. They will be internalized. And once internalized, they are difficult to reverse. So the future queen stands where she has always stood, between self and system, between modern expectation and inherited obligation. Not resisting the role, not romanticizing it, simply carrying it forward with discipline. The pressure to find a partner is real, but it is not frantic. It is controlled, institutional, and patient. It exists because succession must be seen, not promised. Because continuity must be embodied, not explained. And because when the moment arrives, there will be no space left for ambiguity. Choosing a king. In those words lies the final tension. Not a choice of love alone, but a choice that binds another life permanently to the state. A decision that will echo beyond reigns, beyond popularity, beyond the present moment. Spain will recognize the outcome not in celebration, but in feeling. In whether the institution seems to settle, or to strain. For now, the future remains open. The system holds. The silence endures. And history waits, as it always does, for the moment when possibility becomes structure, and the next chapter can no longer be deferred.